All righty. Good day, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome to week 7 of NFL football. I have a couple of special guests along with me and Kyle here today. You'll see over here on this side of me, you guys probably recognize Ian from our rankings episode. Everyone say
Hello.
hello. To my left over here, we have our good friend and league mate, Rory. Rory, say hello. Thank you. Thank you. Down here on the bottom, the cute guy with the glasses, that is Jared, our good friend and league mate. They're going to just hang out with us today while we talk about our normal stuff. We have an extra segment we're going to do. We're just going to kind of bounce some stuff off of them and get their insight.
I know
Maybe
nothing.
get a little bit of extra spicy content here for you guys this week. So, all right, without further ado, let's jump right into the Thursday night recap. Jaguars and Saints. Awesome game all around, honestly, from both teams. I know that the Saints definitely struggled in the beginning of the game, and there's a lot of question marks with that team as a whole, but they were able to make it a game. And, realistically, with the exception of that drop in the last seconds of the game, we could have seen an overtime shootout in prime time. It would have been great. But, and then on the flip side of the ball, the Jaguars were able to overcome a couple of early game mistakes, put out a solid performance. I mean, kudos to Trevor Lawrence on short rest with that bruised knee, putting on that brace, and I mean, rushing for a career high, 59 yards. That's testament to how what kind of player he is, and I think that that puts the league on notice. Like, hey, this guy's a gamer. He'll be able to beat you with his legs, even if he's in a situation where you think that's not going to happen. So yeah, and so Kyle, just tell me what you saw from the Jaguars offensively. Give me a little more details on the fantasy output from the Jags.
The Jaguars here, they're sitting at 4-2. I believe they've been meeting their expectations more or less on the season. What I'd like to point out is that Christian Kirk has been really consistent, as where Calvin Ridley more so, hasn't really been looking as sharp. So ETN has been taken from Trevor Lawrence quite a lot lately, especially in this game. So Trevor Lawrence owners, that's something you might want to keep your eye on and just hope that ETN just doesn't take away from all the fantasy potential. So up next, I think we're going to talk about some injuries. Ben, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. Probably the number one injury being monitored this week. Christian McCaffrey dealing with the oblique strain, and I guess there was another, I think ribs or some other thing that they mentioned in practice, which I don't honestly didn't even know where that came from. But the oblique strain is what he had last week, which we saw him running on the sideline, trying to get back into that game. They erred on the side of caution, and hopefully that wasn't one of the factors that cost them the game. Realistically, I mean, it was a 4-quarter game. The 49ers played poorly in all 4 quarters last week. But so McCaffrey today, he's working with the trainers on the sideline. He was still officially listed as a do not practice because they have to actually give it, a verdict on whether or not he would have practiced or whatever, silly, jargon that they have to put out. Anyway, it seems like that, like this is truly a 50-50 situation here. I wouldn't really, if you have Mitchell or Mason, it's going to be a tough call if McCaffrey sits to, which one of those guys is truly going to have the more upside. We know Mitchell's been with the team longer, but I mean, it's truly for me in this week, it seems like a plus matchup. But then again, I mean, whichever one of those guys ends up getting in the end zone is going to be the one that's worth playing. So, but that's still, he has the extra day to rest up. So let's just, we'll monitor that going into the weekend. But I mean, it's McCaffrey. He told Kyle Shanahan said to the press today that McCaffrey told him to, practice like I'm going to be there on Monday night. So to me, that's a good sign. That tells me that he's going to gut it out. He's going to do everything he can to get on the field against Minnesota. Kyle, go for it.
So up next here, guys, I got Kyler Murray. He has potentially returning soon. The Cardinals activated him off of IR, so they're taking those steps toward having Murray play on the season here. They've obviously listed him as out for this upcoming game, but who knows? Maybe next week is when we'll see him. It's looking like a somewhat of a possibility here.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the changes made there, and especially now with the trade deadline coming up. There's a couple of pieces on that team that could very easily be on the trade block. I know Marquise Brown has been in a couple of talks, and I mean, even a guy like somebody might make a move for Zach Ertz. Not that he's the Zach Ertz of 4 or 5 years ago, but I mean, if a team is struggling for another pass catching option, I mean, Zach Ertz has still shown that he's serviceable, and he's a great possession target. So, my last one that I want to talk about real quick is DK Metcalf. Coach Carroll said that he is going to be a game time decision this week. He's dealing with a rib injury that he's been dealing with, I guess, pretty much since week 2 was when people first noticed. It's just nagging. I think it's just tenderness, but obviously it has hindered his play enough that he's been having to monitor it pretty much all season. He was limited in practice today and is on track to play this week, but it is still worth monitoring. And still, obviously, if you're a Tyler Lockett fantasy owner or a Geno Smith fantasy owner, those are one of those guys that's going to benefit, one of those guys that's going to hinder their performance this week. So definitely worth monitoring going into the end, and have a backup plan if Metcalf is someone that you plan on putting in your lineup this week.
Yeah, sounds like he's bricked up. So up next we have Deontay Johnson, and it looks like he's returning here at LA. He's going to be playing against the Rams here, and I think this might boost the Steelers' offense a little bit, but until play calling can be a bit more consistent, I'm not so sure if you can trust Deontay Johnson in fantasy whatsoever at this point.
Yeah, they still have Matt Canada problems there. But, I mean, with the Saints offensive coordinator is going to give Matt Canada a run for his money this year is what it seems like. He's trying to work his way to that level of WTF. So let's move on to the Game of the Week segment. I will start off by talking about my Game of the Week choice, which for most people, it's a mouth-watering matchup. Philadelphia and Miami. This is what will be, this should be one of the games of the year for sure, at least up until this point. You have the number one offense, rushing and receiving. Anytime they're playing, it's must-see TV at this point. It is just, it's a fantasy, it's a fantasy free-for-all for pretty much anyone in the Miami offense right now. And on the flip side of the ball, I mean, it's still the Eagles. They are top 10 in passing, and they're number 2 in rushing. So they're right there with them. Like, this should be all around just must-see TV here. And I'm giving Philly the advantage here just because they're at home. And I truly believe that they're the better of the two defenses in this situation. So if they're able to go in there, or if they're able to show up on Sunday and limit Miami's run game options and kind of force Tyreek to beat him over the top, and we'll see. The Philadelphia secondary has not played like they did last year, not even close. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a bloodbath. I want to see if Jared. I'm going to call upon you, Jared. From both teams, give me a person on each team. Who do you look to in this week? Who's going to be the MVP on each of these teams this week?
Well, you already know I got my boy Tyreek. And then on the other side, I mean, I would love to give it to Devonta Smith, but it's probably going to be A.J. Brown.
Yeah, Devonta Smith has definitely been somewhat underwhelming these past few weeks, but Yeah, the two wide receivers, the two number one, the two alphas. There, I don't think there's anyone on either secondary that can shut those guys down.
Yeah,
Um,
it's gonna be a bloodbath for sure.
Do either Rory or Ian, either of you guys have anything you want to say about that game? Anything you're looking forward to in that game?
I think it's going to be a pretty incredible game. And I definitely see where you're coming from with the Eagles defense, but man, the Dolphins offense is hard to stop right now. And it's going to be intense. Just personally, I would say that Raheem Mostert is going to be the top dog on fantasy points. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one as well. I think that Raheem's going to put up a pretty good game, and I don't know if they're going to be able to stop him.
Well, they have done well against the run this year, and hopefully, but we have seen Mostert line up and, on the outside and, catch passes all season long. It's going to be obviously a little bit less, with the rookie star Achane out right now, still on IR for a few more weeks. So he's going to have to be in the bell cow position. But yeah, not just hard to stop, Ian, the hardest to stop for sure, and by a long shot. So my prediction is, though, I'm going to 34-31 Philly is my prediction. So I'm giving Philly the edge. I think it's going to be a nail biter. But this will be the game, though. I might stop riding the Philly train here if Miami can put it to them this week. So, Kyle, let's hear your game of the week.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out first that game has some crazy talent in it. Like, those wide receivers are extremely good.
Yeah,
It's gonna be fun to watch.
on both sides.
So up next here, my game of the week, it's going to be Detroit at Baltimore. And the storyline really going into this game is the Ravens, who seemed pretty out of sync against the Steelers, versus the powerhouse and the Lions, who are just creative and firing on all cylinders here. It's going to be really interesting. This is going to take place in Baltimore, so the Lions aren't necessarily going to have home field advantage, but is it really going to matter? Because it turns out that there's a lot of Lions fans traveling. I've seen pictures online of Lions fans like packed in the Buccaneer Stadium from the previous week's game. So, that's kind of insane to see. It's been a while since the Lions have had truly a team to be like super excited about. And, shout out to Lions.
I'm right there with you, Kyle. Shout out the
I
Lions.
just want to clarify. I think that you meant that the Baltimore looked in sync against Tennessee this week in Europe, right? You're talking about that game?
Yes, that game, as well as the
Yeah, I know, it's
Steelers
just-
game. Sorry.
I want to clarify for everybody. He's not talking about week 3 or whatever.
No,
Even though they did look in sync in that game as well.
yeah.
Or was it week 4? I don't know. It's all a blur to me, everybody.
Yeah, it's just going to be all about if the Ravens can get things together and, pull out a win against this strong Lions team. Ian, what do you think about this game going into this week?
I think that'll be a pretty good game. I mean, the Lions have really got it put together pretty well this year. So it'll really come down to what team Baltimore brings to the field, honestly.
I don't know. For some reason, I feel like they might come up out of nowhere and do something. But I kind of do have a little bit of hope for Detroit because they haven't been good in the past year. So you always kind of want the underdog to win. But at the same time, I don't know. I think it's gonna be a good game. I think the Baltimore Ravens could come up and like I said, spook us a little bit here. But we'll see.
Yeah, to summarize, it's definitely going to be one of those games where I think that most people would kind of indicate that this is going to be a defensive game and the scoring is going to come at a premium. But I would not be surprised to see it actually go the opposite way, because I think a lot of people said the same thing about the Thursday night game here with Jacksonville and New Orleans, a couple of top-tier defenses on short rest. think people were expecting this, struggling offense with New Orleans and Trevor Lawrence coming off of an injury. I think people just naturally assumed. A lot of people bet the under on that game for sure, and got burned. Clearly got burned. The under was 41, and they overcame the Saints. The Saints ruined that for you. So if you're a Saints fan and you bet the under, you're probably in a weird predicament where you're mad at your team double because they lost and also screwed you over on your money. But
Yeah, poor Saints.
anyway,
fans.
yeah, it's gonna be definitely one of the games that you want to watch all the way through and through. Anyway, we're taking too much time. Let's jump right over to the send it portion here. I'll kick it off. I'm going to start with Terry McLaurin here. I think that we're going to see Terry McLaurin's first breakout game of the season. Obviously, if he has the potential to just ruin defenses, and I think that the Giants, they're in a spot. This team is miserable. I mean, they just really have not a whole lot going for them. And whether or not Daniel Jones plays this week, I think that they're not going to be in the greatest of situations. But I think that Washington, Sam Howell in the passing game has been barely decent. Terry McLaurin was targeted for a season high 11 targets last week. I think that they're going to go right back to him, and it's kind of a squeaky wheel situation after that Thursday night game where he wasn't really involved, and they got Chicago put it to him. I see them going right to Terry McLaurin early and often, and hopefully he can get over the top. And we're looking at probably a trudging here by the Commanders, and it's not really a team that you would expect to be able to do that, but that's where New York is at right now this year. So, Kyle, who do you got for your first?
My first send it, I put these send its in with mind that 6 teams are on a bye, so I know there's going to be some teams out there, fantasy-wise, that are going to be digging in the waiver wire for certain specific players. First up, he might be owned in some leagues, he might not be owned, you might want to check, but I got Joshua Palmer, and this is going to be a shootout game. I expect it to be high scoring, hopefully. We got Mike Williams out for the year, of course. And, my only concern going into this game for Josh Palmer is the Kansas City defense. They've been able to lock some teams down here. And, they've really been impressive so far this year, honestly. So that's what I got for my first send it. Jared, what do you think?
I think that was beautiful.
And what do you think about Joshua Palmer here in this divisional matchup against the Chiefs?
I think that is honestly probably your next best option as far as wide receivers go. So I would definitely agree with you on that.
For sure. Would anyone else like to chime in on Joshua Palmer's potential here against the Chiefs?
Yeah, I just want to say that Quentin Johnson hasn't had an impact really at all this season, and let alone since Mike Williams has been out. So Josh Palmer's definitely pretty much been relegated to number 2 spot, and the only thing I could see is, like you said, if Kansas City is able to lock that offense down as a whole, if the opportunities come at a premium, depending on the situation, it might be a game that's dominated by just Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. He might, Justin Herbert just might lean on his stars this game, and we'll see. We will see. The Kansas City offense, on the flip side, has not been stellar. If Kansas City makes a few mistakes and maybe we're able to get a defensive score, or just get good field position where they really don't have to do a whole lot, we might be looking at a low-scoring affair, and Los Angeles might be able to sneak out with one. So, but remains to be seen. Is for sure. Ian, do you have a send it prepared for us?
Yes, sir. So
Let's hear it.
I think that my send it for this week would be Kareem Hunt. Last week they actually used him, and it was a really tough defense that he was playing against. So I think that going into this week, the Colts definitely have a pretty decent team this year. But compared to the 49ers defense, I think that he has a lot of potential there. And the Browns really haven't gotten anything going offensively. So I think that's the best shot they have.
Yeah, I would agree. They're going to have to lean on the run game this week. I mean, the Indianapolis defense stacking up against the 49ers, it's definitely a tier or two down below them. But, I mean, we will see. They're going to come to play, and hopefully, Kareem Hunt still had a questionable tag as far as I'm concerned today. I think he was on the right side of questionable, where it was like something that they just threw that questionable tag on him anyway. But yeah, him and Jerome Ford will probably both be viable fantasy plays this week, especially in a flex situation. And Rory, I know you didn't have anyone prepared for a send it situation, but is there anyone that you feel like this week, anyone's got a matchup, someone that you're high on this week, anyone that you could just off the top of your head?
I was thinking about it as you guys were talking, and you kind of told me earlier to pick him up, but I think it was a good idea to go with Elijah Moore definitely this week. So I think that he has a possibility of putting up a little bit of points, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you. That's all I have. That's the only person that I have. I thought that was a decent pick. Whenever you said go ahead and pick him up really quick, so I'd have to go with him. I think he has a decent chance of putting up some points this week. Follow up last week a little bit better than he did.
I think it was better than the other option you had in there. That's for sure.
Yes, Sky Moore. Thanks.
One more for the other more.
Oh,
So,
man.
all right. I will move on to my second real quick. Let's kind of speed it up here. My second one's Darren Waller. Same game that I talked about earlier. On the flip side of the coin, I mean, regardless if Daniel Jones plays or not, honestly, the Washington defense has been bad. They're the fourth ranked passing defense. They've given up plenty of yards. Regardless of what the game script has been, they're getting beat in the air. So I think that in a situation where this team they might be out to a score or two lead, they're going to put New York in a situation. If Tyrod Taylor's going to get the start again to throw, and Darren Waller is that kind of guy who can be the safety net in the middle of the field. PPR wise, I could easily see 7-8 catches for 70, 80 yards, an easy 15 points for him. And, maybe he gets in the end zone. Maybe the Giants score a touchdown this week. Who knows? Maybe Graham Gano gets a lot more work. Who knows? Either way, he's pretty much the only outside of, Saquon Barkley. He's the only viable skill player on that team to really put in a fantasy lineup this week. So, Kyle, want to wrap it up real quick on the send it?
All right. So my last send it here is Rashee Rice. And I know he hasn't been everywhere in every single game or anything like that. But the Los Angeles Chargers have allowed the most points per game for wide receivers so far this year. And I'm liking this opportunity. Rashee Rice had 72 yards against the Broncos, and, he looks to improve upon this where, the passing game is for sure going to be shown off in this Chiefs and Chargers game. So, as I said as well, there's 6 teams on bye, so if you guys want to make a dart throw or if you guys are optimistic based off of Rashee Rice's last performance against the Broncos, you might want to consider starting him.
Yeah, don't disagree with you there. An honorable mention for me this week, just throwing it out there, would also be Braxton Berrios in that shootout game we talked about earlier. If you're really, really desperate and you have one of those deep flex leagues, 12 team or 14 team, you might want to just grab Berrios if he's away on the waivers and just throw him in your lineup. Anyway, let's move on to the end it portion. My first one is James Cook, Buffalo Bills running back. He has not been, terrible by any means this year, for sure. This is not James Cook slander by me choosing him for an end it. I just think this week, even against the Patriots, where, it's probably going to be positive game script. I'm just looking at the numbers here. He has 1 touchdown all season, and he has a 100-plus yard performance. So the numbers just aren't there for me. If I think that there's probably at least 12 to, even with all the bye weeks, I think there's, 10 to 12 better plays this week. I mean, if you're in a situation where you got to play James Cook, by all means do it. But if you're in one of those, maybe a 8-team league or a 10-team league that you have, not a huge expanded roster, if you have the opportunity to go with wide receiver heavy this week in your flex or something like that, you put one of those dart throws in over James Cook. I just don't see, unless everything goes right for him this week, I don't see. I mean, it's one of those potential things. Does he have the potential? We haven't seen it so far this year. So, Ian, I know you have an end prepared for us.
I do. And I might not be so sure about this anymore, but I'll still run with it. So my end is Jahmyr Gibbs, but I will say I did not know that David Montgomery was not playing. So not necessarily quite sure on that, to be honest, because he hasn't produced very well. But with David Montgomery being out, I'm not necessarily going to say that for sure end it anymore.
So it's a bend it then.
It's a
We're bending
it. I'm not entirely sure.
We'll label it as
Hmm.
that. We'll
Yeah.
say, everybody, Jahmyr Gibbs, proceed with caution.
There
It's a
you
yellow
go.
light.
There you go. That's a
Bench.
good
It's not a
idea.
green light, not a red light. It's a yellow light. Proceed with caution. You don't want to upset
Oh,
Kyle,
man.
though, because we already know Kyle's playing him this week. So
Well, I'm not
Sure
going
as
to have a
hell
problem
wasn't
against
gonna be
Rory,
Kyle's.
so Jahmyr Gibbs can score me like negative 15 points, and I'd be all right.
with confidence.
Oh,
All right,
man.
Kyle, who's your first end it then, Kyle?
My first end it is going to be Jerry Jeudy against the Packers. The Broncos team as a whole has been looking quite sad lately, and they're making Bronco fans quite sad as well. And Jerry Jeudy just hasn't been doing it at all for anybody lately, fantasy-wise. So until I see some more production out of Jerry Jeudy here, I would say don't put him in your lineup if you can afford to.
Yep, don't disagree with you there. He has been a just massive disappointment. And that whole beef with him and Steve Smith was pretty funny. If anyone didn't catch
That
up on
was
that, I would go
great.
research that, look at the videos and whatnot. You'll get a good laugh out of it. Anyway, I'm gonna end it with a couple more. This is like a kind of a group pick here for my second one. Is this week's situation for the Los Angeles Rams running backs. There is a lot of hullabaloo going on over there with Sean McVay adding guys like Darrell Henderson back to the practice squad. And then he got guys like Myles Gaskin, Royce Freeman, the Zach Evans guy from last week. There is a lot of, trying to figure out who is going to start for us. I think that that's just bad for fantasy owners. I mean, for the team, it seems like they're going to go with a committee approach here because there's no clear-cut number one. Some people thought it was Zach Evans in the beginning, and now there's a lot of fog and gray area. I'm going to say just stay away. If you can, stay away. There are some other, running backs we mentioned earlier, like guys like Donta Foreman, Jahmyr Gibbs apparently is, that's in the middle. There's some other guys you can go with this week, I think you'll fare a lot better than this big question mark where, at max, what are we going to see? You're going to see 6 or 7 points. I mean, if you can win your league with 6 or 7 points at your flex, then by all means, then go for it. But I say just stay away from that backfield this week. Yeah.
All right, my next edit is going to be Rachaad White against Atlanta. I don't think Rachaad White has what it takes to penetrate through Atlanta's backfield here. And honestly, I don't see Tampa Bay opening up any holes here for Rachaad White. So I just don't think that he's going to be one of the playmakers in this game. We got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on this team. And
Boy.
What'd you say, Jared? Would you like to chime in?
Nah. That's my boy.
I think he might have mentioned that if Tampa Bay's backfield was more like your mother, that he'd be able to penetrate a bit deeper.
What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen,
Oh man,
is that
Wolves are bricks.
Rachaad White against this Falcons defense, I'm not expecting this to be a high-scoring game. I'm not really sure he's going to be the one making the big plays in this game that are needed to win for either side. So that's why my final ended is Rachaad White. Guys, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally in disagreement with you, Rachaad White. Haven't seen a whole lot of potential from him so far this season. He has had the volume to succeed, and I mean, obviously with a team led by Baker Mayfield, you're really limited to, sorry for the Baker Mayfield slander, but yeah, I mean, it's Baker Mayfield. He's really limiting the offense. He's been able to have some, nice connection with Chris Godwin and against weak defenses. He looks like one of the top 16 QBs in the league. But then he'll play a team like the Lions and remind you that he is, in fact, not one of the top 16 QBs in the league. That's enough said about him. We'll just move right on to the last and new segment of our show here. We are going to go in depth and we're going to talk about waiver wire pickups and who you should have, who you should drop. So I'll just start it off in this week's waiver wire warrior, as we'd like to say, is Donta Foreman. This to me it's a slam dunk matchup for him against a soft Raiders defense. Rashawn Johnson was officially ruled out today. His concussion is going to keep him out for another week. If you watched Donta Foreman last year or picked him up at, mid-season last year when he was, in that fill-in duty for Carolina, he's been around in the league for a while, but he had his, a career year last year, 900-plus yards rushing. And he averaged 4.5 yards a carry. He was solid in his work for the Panthers last year. So I think that, he had about 15, 16 touches this last week, averaged 4 yards a carry. Looked, a modest showing. I expect him to at least touch the ball 15 to 20 times again this week and not really have competition. I mean, I think this is out of the guys that are available, especially for running backs. He will be a solid pickup this week, especially just to add that Chicago has a Division II rookie quarterback, Tyson Bagent, however it's pronounced. I don't care. Not going to make him play any better either way. They're going to lean on the run game this week and probably try to keep the ball out of the defender's hands. Cal?
Yeah, that's the name of the game right there, And my speculative ad, I should say, of the week here, because he hasn't played it all this season, comes in the form of a question. Has anyone added Julio Jones to their lineup?
Well, not to play this week, but yes.
All right. So
I
Julio
didn't even know he
Jones.
was still alive.
Many people thought he just disappeared, but apparently not. Apparently he's still in football, and he's looking to make a splash on this very talented Eagles team. You know, the Eagles are just bolstering their roster here, and there's nothing wrong with adding a veteran wide receiver like Julio. So
Now Devonta Smith is definitely not going to get the ball.
Might be right about that, but we'll see.
We will
If anybody
see.
wants to make a trade,
Julio Jones has become somewhat of a dinosaur. Unfortunately, it's been one of the most tragic, downturns of a career, because he was, in my opinion, in my life so far, has been one of the most electrifying, one of the most talented wide receivers I've ever watched with my eyes, and I'm glad I got to see him in his prime. But it's been he could have definitely been up there and shattered some more records had he stayed healthy these last few seasons. But I wish him well. Obviously, he's going to a talented team, and he might just be one of those fun pickups, but and maybe a fun play when he does finally get in and he has a plus matchup. So we will see. We will see. Maybe there's hope for him. We've seen other receivers in the past, the Reggie Waynes and other guys, play until their late 30s, and he's 34. There might be a possession role for him in this offense. So it all remains to be seen. He's a bird again, folks. He's a bird again.
Yeah,
He's gonna fly.
the Eagles must have liked what they saw from him when he tried out for them. So maybe he has something left in the tank there.
I believe in him.
I will just throw out this. Isn't Travis Kelce like 34?
Yes.
Yeah, but since he's dating
But
Taylor
he
Swift,
also,
it's not like 5
I was
years.
going to mention that. He has discovered the fountain of youth, and that is Taylor Swift's underpants.
Oh, jeez.
So whatever injury he might have, he's just going to shake it off,
God damn it.
No, I'm just throwing it out there though, for real, about Julio. I compare it almost. I know it's not the same at all, but to Calvin Ridley. He not in the same situation. I mean, he took a year off for personal reasons, and then got caught betting, and then got suspended, and then all this nonsense. But he came back. No, he hasn't done a ton, but he's there, and he's able to produce. Not necessarily he is producing yet, but just throwing it out there.
Well, what I will say about Calvin Ridley is he did get brought into an offense that has a lot of mouths to feed, and the game script hasn't necessarily been there for some of their games. But I mean, Calvin Ridley is having an impact in ways that don't necessarily show up on the fantasy stat sheet.
Exactly.
He draws that top coverage. He gets downfield looks. He's opening up things for some of the other guys, and I think that's why we're starting to see consistency out of Christian Kirk, because we know that Christian Kirk is going to operate out of the slot more so than a guy like Calvin Ridley is going to be your number one, your X receiver. So, and what I think that you might see him get some more, more opportunities when Zay Jones can get back on the field and stay on the field. Then you'll get, your X, Y, and Kirk in the slot. I think that's really, really what they need. To get Calvin Ridley to be freed up. But either way, the Jags are winning games. They're scoring points. And Calvin Ridley will beat up on some of these softer defenses and better matchups that he has coming down the pipe. So,
for sure.
Have hope. Have faith.
Oh, yes. Have faith in Julio.
I believe in him, like I said.
Oh, yeah.
He's got this.
Julio for president 2024.
I stand for Julio. I'm picking him up.
Oh, man. So
I'd say it's a little bit too late. I believe that the person above me has already picked him up. I could be wrong.
I picked him up. He is on my team.
Never mind. This guy.
I'll trade you Odell Beckham for him.
One
Jeez.
washed up guy for another washed up guy. Sounds like a fair
Jeez.
trade.
Remember when that would have been a good trade?
Yep.
Back in the day, that would have been a blockbuster trade about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You would have been. That would have been
You're not
groundbreaking.
wrong. Yeah.
Would have been absolutely groundbreaking.
Oh,
But you would have been
my
crazy.
boys.
You would have been insane to trade away Julio for anything.
That's true.
I wouldn't have traded away Julio for a brand new Lexus at that point, when he was having his breakouts, 1,800-yard big,
Heard
All
bad
right, we're
things
rambling
about
now,
Lexus.
folks.
Hon, I have
wrap it
a
up.
question for Kyle. I have a question
Alright,
for Kyle.
One last
Okay, is
question,
it fantasy
gentlemen.
related here? Okay.
Hey, Kyle. Do you have an ass crack of the week?
Jeez.
Ass crack of the week, gentlemen. Right here. Right before our very eyes. It's number 70, Paris Johnson Jr., everyone. Ass crack of the week. This is a segment that Ben has been demanding for weeks now that we add in. And I'm so happy
I do not.
I'm so happy to have it included, everyone.
I don't remember saying that, but it's on your computer, so my search history stays clean.
All right.
Oh man.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Anyway, in other news, thanks for tuning in, everyone. All 8 of you, or 5 of you, or however many, all 3 of you, whatever it is. We appreciate you guys' support and your viewership, and your like, comment, subscribe. We're gonna have more episodes like this and continue to improve the quality of our content, and to make it a little more laxdays, a little more laissez-faire, but still giving you good information here in the future. Stay tuned. We are going to have a live special episode here coming up on the Monday night game for the Halloween game. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, good luck in your matchups this week. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on Thursday.